Greetings from Southern California. My name is William Catling, and I'll be speaking to you today about art and spirituality. How do we create a new framework for a theoretical understanding of this intersection? I spent the last 3 months sheltering in place and wishing that I was with all of you in Ireland right now. But instead of that, we have a chance to be virtually connected, and I'm excited about this opportunity. A little bit about myself. I've been teaching for the last 40 years, spending the last 3 decades at the collegiate level doing undergrad and graduate instruction in art. I specialize in this art and spirituality intersection in my teaching, in my thinking, and in my artwork. As we look back through the origins of humanity, we see a natural intersection of art and spirituality. Up till the 1700s, it's just a normal part of community life, starting with cave and rock art, places of worship, sacred places, paintings, drawings, sculpture, ceremonial dressing, and interactions. It was a part of life. Art, community, spirituality, there was no disconnection. It's completely normal. I think the separation probably begins in the West with modernism. Now, some people date modernism from the 1600s, others early 1800s, but from the beginning of rationalism, scientific exploration, industrialization, political and social movements, world wars, theoretical and psychological movements, it all worked to form this separation where mystery and spirituality and religion became disconnected from everyday life, especially in the arts. Now, there's lots of debate on if this separation came as a natural outflow of the development of humanity, or is it a loss? Is it a gain? But in the contemporary art world, it turned to something, we use the word disdain. Anytime spirituality, religion gets brought up in the academic circles, it's kind of looked at as a problem. And I've done a lot of reading, a lot of thinking, a lot of looking, and I find that even though in the academic circles and sometimes the professional circles, this disdain is found beneath all of this, and especially in one particular writer, her name is Charlene Spretnik. She believes there's an underground spiritual river flowing through all of modern art. And she spends a lot of her research discovering what was there. But it brings up the question, what do I mean by spirituality? What am I talking about? Some people think spirituality is the big framework and religion sits inside there as a smaller umbrella. Other writers and thinkers see religion as the big umbrella and spirituality as an aspect of that. Others think that it's been co-opted by pop thinking and has no real place in academia. I would like to think that we could find a definition of spirituality that works academically, that works personally, that works for our artistic endeavors in our communities. Artist Richard Tuttle is quoted to say, "What I want more than anything is a definition of spirituality that is trustworthy." So let me put together for you what I think is a simple beginning discussion about what spirituality is, kind of a working definition for us for this time. And here are the points. Working spirituality means it extends beyond a focus on self. It's a spirituality embedded in a much larger context. Some people even think cosmic. It talks about the interrelatedness of existence. It's the creativity of the universe. We look at the cosmos infused what we called an unfolding dynamic of becoming. There's also this idea that it's a unitive dimension of being, that we're unified at a level. Some people call it the unified field, or the field of spirituality. Um, it also could be considered an awareness of, an engagement of that unity and those dynamics that we just discussed. So that's a very open ended way of looking at it, but I think it works as we begin to examine modern art and contemporary practice. So let's look at some examples, maybe, of how this plays out. I have a friend, Nigel Goodwin, who started off his career on the stage in Britain and then moved on to become an advocate for spirituality and art intersections and traveled the world encouraging people to do this. He was at a dance performance of Martha Graham's troupe. Those of you who don't know, she was considered the founders of modern dance in Europe and the West. And he went to her after the performance and he said, "Martha, you know something. What do you know?" And he reports her response is, "Dance is the mother of all arts." And Nigel asks her, "How is that so?" And she says, "The spirit moved over the surface of the deep." Well, she's referring to the Hebrew creation story, which talks about this connection of the spirit and material. That the spirit's moving, hovering, connecting to the development of materiality. And it seems to mean that it's not formless and void as in nothing, but it's just particles that haven't yet been developed. Or for the artist, it's material that hasn't been formed yet. And the spirit is intimately involved in the creative process. And I thought it's a beautiful statement, and it's a great kind of foundation for us to, again, begin exploring some examples of what art looked like and what spirituality looked like in modernism. We go back to William Blake, late 1700s in England. And he presented what's called a visionary true Christianity, where he wanted to join individual freedom and a passionate embrace of what for him was the meaning of Christ. Later in Germany, Caspar David Friedrich, he does figurative works that seem to exist in these transcendent environments. And he's quoted as saying, "A painter should not only paint what is, but what is seen within." This idea of the artist's creative eye looking inside into this spiritual dynamic field. Now, the Hudson River School in the US and Canada in the 1800s called the work that they did luminism. They wanted to paint the divine presence in the wilderness beyond materialistic concerns. So you see this tension between materiality or love of materiality and what's beneath it, beyond it, how nature becomes a window into this dynamic spiritual field. Jacob Lawrence, a black artist in America, is quoted as saying, "All artists are constantly looking for something, and they don't always know what." This search for meaning, this search for something more powerful outside of ourselves, that the arts become a way of exploring that. In France, in the Impressionistic movement and symbolism, there's a number of artists that clearly speak about this, and Renoir is one of them. And he saw nature and women as being infused with divine grace, eternal serenity, and that art should nurture a spiritual context. Mary Cassatt, she turned towards a higher level of meaning, a larger spiritual sensibility. Her mother and child paintings are a direct reference to the Madonna and child images throughout all of Catholicism. Now, Van Gogh saw God in two places, according to his letters. He saw God in the field, in nature, and in the cradle. He was never able to have a child of his own, and I think that longing for a child was connected to a sense of spirituality. He was trained to be a Protestant minister, went to work in a small coal mining village, was fired by the church because he gave everything he had away. And there's some discussion of the details of all this, but he didn't stay aloof enough. He wanted his Christianity, his spirituality, to be practical, to be connected to people. Um, he wrote to his brother Theo in a letter. He said, having a terrible need of, shall I say the word, of religion, then I go outside in the night to paint the stars. And we know the powerful impact of Starry Night has had on generations since he painted it. Now, there's a group of artists in Europe at this time in the late 19th, early 20th century. They call themselves the Nabi, or Nabis, Nabis. It's pronounced, I think, Nabi. It means the prophets. It's taken from the Hebrew language. And they were looking for visual forms to somehow illuminate what's beyond the material world. They also saw themselves as truth speakers, that they had a role of speaking some kind of truth into a culture that they were concerned with becoming too material, too disconnected from the invisible world. In expressionism and abstraction in the US and Europe throughout the 1900s, artists saw the invisible realm as a vibratory field, a place of cosmic order, an essence within nature, an inner necessity, and looking for a dynamic equilibrium. George Rouault, in the early to mid 1900s, painted out of his Catholicism, his thinking deeply about the church and God and life. And he was looking for what was spiritual and Christian, informed by an undercurrent of hope, redemption, and tenderness, not topics that you find in most mainstream artists. The abstract expressionism of the late 50s in US and Europe was looking at what we call the collective unconscious, or the human element that surpasses boundaries, cultures, times. And they were looking for a language of the spirit, a kind of metaphysical painting. They were also wrestling with this existential nature of who are we, how can we exist, the potential of nuclear fallout taking out the world as we know it. Now, Anthony Caro, another artist, he said, is art so different from religion? It feeds the spirit, and through it, you also try to find this inner part of yourself. Anna Mendieta, a very powerful performance artist, she said, my art is the way I reestablish the bonds that unite me to the universe. James Turrell, a very famous land artist, he says, if you think of the world as a spiritual experience, this does not bother me. Artists have been doing this. It is part of their job description. Now, Turrell was raised as a Quaker and still sees this idea that you would come into the light when you came to a gathering. So a lot of his work, his projects have to do with light and humanity and connecting that way. So there are just some examples of artists for the last 100 years, 200 years that have been wrestling deeply with this idea of art, spirituality, their connection, and how that works. So when I think about theories of art, think about formalism, structuralism, feminism, expressionism, the whole group. Each theory has a set of core values. This is what we believe is true, and sometimes this is what we do not believe is true, is implied in there. A lot of the movements and theories are reactions against other ones, or a proclamation of this is finally the true understanding of what art is and what it should do. And those core values are always supported by a set of belief systems, the things that the authors of those movements think are true. So I thought, as a part of this conversation, I would attempt to provide some core values and some belief systems to support that we might use as an operating foundational idea of what a theory of art and spirituality might look like. Core values, I put down 3 of them. The first one is very simple. There is a God or invisible power in the universe. Just to say, it's more than just stuff. It's more than just material. There's something else out there. There's something beyond, outside of us, bigger than us, that's operating. Now, the second part is this invisible reality, or God, interacts with the physical world, that there is a matter and spirit connection. That we're not somehow operating separate, but there's this interplay that Martha Graham talked about, the spirit dancing, touching, connecting. And the third core value is that humanity is connected by what has been described as the collective unconscious. That when you walk into a museum and you're looking at a piece of art from a different culture, a different time period, you can be connected to it, that there's something, a set of universals that connect all of human. You look at cave drawings done in 30,000 years ago, and you find the renderings of a deer or a horse, and you feel like you could have that same drawing done today, same power, this connection. So those 3 core values, there's invisible power or God, it interacts with us, and that humans are connected, this field. Now, belief systems, I put together 6 of them as a way of just beginning this dialogue that can be taken much further. And hopefully some of you will find a way to do that in your own thinking, in your own writing, in your own practice. So the first belief system, I say, is art is a visible manifestation of an invisible set of ideas. In Christianity, it's called incarnation. I don't know the term necessarily in other traditions, but this idea of matter and spirit being connected, that something invisible becomes visible through the work of the shaman, the priest, the spiritual leader, and in fact, the artist. Every creative person who has an idea and transforms it into an object and experience participates in this process. The second belief system, art has the capacity of embodying truths or meaning. That we don't live in an object-neutral world. We experience meaning and value through objects, through experiences, and art partakes in that process. One of the functions of art is to reveal truths or meaning of our complex world. It's the third one. Art operates in a world to bring clarity and value. The fourth thing, things have and hold meaning. Art functions as a vessel that contains meaning across time, cultures, and place. The fifth one, art has the potential to be a part of the healing process in individuals and communities. Historically, art has been a part of the wholeness of all communities. And I think a return to that, Susie Gablik wrote a fabulous book called The Re-Enchantment of Art, where she talks about art of a community, art being a part of a process, not just an object to be sold, but an experience to heal and to make whole in our communities. And the last one, art can be part of the invisible glue that holds communities together. Art history and contemporary narrative, storytelling, mythos building, all of these things sustain and informs our cultural identities. I have a couple minutes left here before our time is up, and I just want to share 3 ways in which all this applies to studio practice of an artist. The one is research. And in terms of research, I mean find out where you come from as an artist. Who were your artistic relatives? Go back through history. Find out the stream of artists that you feel like you belong to, their ideas, their thoughts, their lives, their work. And you find your own family tree. Developing what I call the conceptual framework, which involves identifying the spirituality as part of that. So the conceptual framework includes the biography, who are you, where do you come from, why are you an artist, the content and concepts that inform your art, and the artist movements and theories that you find yourself most connected to. So in my studio practice, I have a series of things I do to try to live out this theory of art and spirituality. How does it look? What does it become when it comes to my studio? So I have what are called studio disciplines, and all artists have them whether they call them that or not. So for me, the first one is I have to make visible the ideas that I think about, that I need to make them into objects. Usually I have more ideas than there's ever time to make, but my job is to filter through those ideas and explore the ones that seem important. That I have what are called rituals of interactions. Time, space, how I enter the studio, how I move in the studio, all becomes a part of a dance of spirituality and art connecting in my life. There's rhythms of the practice in the studio. It's seasonal. It's times where it's intense and physically demanding, and other times it's quiet, like winter, thinking, preparing for a spring of activity. Not looking for a constant production level that's year round, but that's connected to the natural rhythm of things. This idea of serving the work, serving the process, the art that is made is not owned, it's given, even though it might be sold or commissioned. The art itself has a life of its own. When it leaves the studio, it takes on something else that's not mine. Finally, I want to live one life. I want to be an artist who goes to work and teaches. I want to be an artist who engages with friends and family, an artist that reads and thinks deeply, that this theoretical connection holds life together, simplifies it, hopefully makes it more powerful, more interesting. Well, if any of you are interested, please email me at bcatling@apu.edu. I'll send you the sources. I've got about 30 or 40 books I've been reading, researching all of this. I'd be happy to share those with you. If you want the outline of my notes, I'd be happy to share those as well. Thank you so much for being a part of this conference. I look forward to listening to so many of you and engaging with your thoughts and ideas. Blessings on you as you go and explore arts, society, life, and in my case, I hope spirituality. Thank you so much.